A young waitress secretly fed an autistic girl daily, whispering, "Hurry, eat before the owner returns." The child replied, "Thank you. Can I take some for my mother?" Then a millionaire entered the restaurant, escorted by 4 police cars, paralyzing everyone. Secrets came to light, altering their lives forever in unpredictable ways. A story of overcoming adversity, redemption, and unconditional love, capable of moving hearts. Subscribe, like, and comment from where you are watching this moving narrative. The restaurant Martha's Corner was located at a busy city intersection among old buildings and humble shops. It wasn't luxurious, but its homemade food attracted workers, employees, and families from the neighborhood. Martha, the owner, was a kind-eyed woman who had inherited the business from her parents and maintained it with effort. Among the employees, Noemia stood out as the best waitress. Tall, with dark hair and a captivating smile, she possessed a special talent for connecting with customers. Every morning she arrived early, put on her white apron, and set the tables with precision, preparing for another intense day. It was on a Tuesday that it all began. The doorbell rang after lunchtime, with the place almost empty. Noemia looked up and saw a little girl at the entrance, hair tied in 2 unkempt ponytails, a simple but clean dress, and large eyes fixed on the floor. "Hello, little one. Are you lost?" Noemia asked, approaching her. The girl didn't answer, keeping her eyes on the floor, slightly swaying her body. "Are you hungry?" Noemia asked again, noticing the girl observing the trays with leftover food. "Yes," the girl softly agreed without looking at her. "Come with me," said Noemia, making a quick decision. She took her to a secluded table where Martha wouldn't see them from the cash register. She went to the kitchen and returned with a plate of hot soup, bread, and orange juice. "Hurry, eat before the owner comes back," Noemia whispered, watching the door to the room where Martha was doing the accounts. The girl ate voraciously, yet methodically, separating the ingredients of the soup. Noemia observed this behavior, the girl avoiding the foods touching each other. "What's your name?" she tried again. "Isabel," the girl answered in a low voice. When she finished, Isabel looked at Noemia with her large brown eyes. "Thank you. Can I take some for my mother? She's hungry too." Noemia's heart ached. Without saying anything, she went to the kitchen and prepared another plate, wrapped in aluminum foil. "Take it, but don't tell anyone, okay?" Isabel agreed, took the package, and left as silently as she had entered. Noemia thought it would be the last time. She was wrong. The next day, at the same time, Isabel appeared, and the following day, and the next. It became a secret routine. Isabel would enter when there were few customers. Noemia would seat her at the same table and serve her a complete meal. Then she would prepare another one for her mother. Over time, Noemia understood Isabel better. The girl had difficulty with eye contact, was frightened by loud noises and repeated phrases like echoes. Noemia had an autistic cousin, recognizing the signs. She also noticed that Isabel always wore the same dress, impeccably clean, and worn shoes but well cared for. The family was going through hardships but maintaining their dignity. One day, after almost 2 weeks, Noemia decided to follow Isabel. She waited until the end of her shift and from a distance followed the little girl, who was carrying the food package. Isabel walked 6 blocks to an old building. She entered through a side door that led to a courtyard with clothes hanging out to dry. Noemia waited and cautiously approached. Inside the courtyard, she heard voices from a small dwelling. The door was ajar, and she saw Isabel sitting in front of a pale and thin woman, slowly eating the food the girl had brought. "It's delicious, Isabel. Did the lady from the restaurant give it to you again?" "Yes, Mom, the lady with the pretty smile." The woman closed her eyes, savoring it. Hair in a messy bun, she wore a worn-out robe. Next to her, medications and unpaid bills. Noemia recoiled, feeling that she was invading the family's privacy, but she tripped over a bucket, alerting the woman. "Who's there?" Isabel's mother asked, getting up with difficulty. Noemia, embarrassed, stepped forward. "Excuse me, I'm Noemia, the waitress who has been giving food to your daughter." The woman looked at her intently and lowered her head. "Come in, please." Noemia timidly entered. The dwelling was small, but clean and organized, despite the scarcity. There were colorful drawings on the walls, probably made by Isabel. "My name is Fernanda," said the woman, extending a trembling hand. "I don't know how to thank you." Noemia took her hand and noticed how cold and fragile it was. "It was nothing, really. For us, it was everything. Fernanda replied with shining eyes. Since I got sick, it's been difficult. Isabel is special. She needs routine, specific foods. I was a teacher, but now I can barely work a few hours at home. Isabel was sitting on the floor, meticulously drawing, oblivious to the conversation. What happened? Noemia asked delicately. An autoimmune disease. The treatments are expensive, and the insurance doesn't cover everything. Every month is a struggle to pay the rent, medication, and food. Fernanda paused and looked at her daughter with love. Isabel is autistic, but she's brilliant. She should be in a specialized school with appropriate therapies, but she didn't need to finish. Noemia understood perfectly. Don't send Isabel to the restaurant tomorrow, said Noemia. I'll bring the food here after my shift. And maybe I can help you in another way. Fernanda started shaking her head. You've already done too much. Please, let me help, Noemia insisted. We all need help at some point. After that afternoon, the routine changed. Noemia visited Fernanda and Isabel after work, bringing food and sometimes medicines she bought with her own money. She started teaching Isabel memory tricks and playing games that stimulated her concentration. The girl, initially distant, began to wait for her visits with enthusiasm. One day, after almost a month of these visits, Noemia arrived at the restaurant and found Marta waiting for her with a serious expression. Noemia, we need to talk, said the owner, pointing to her office. Noemia's heart quickened. Had Marta discovered she was giving away food? Would she fire her? Already in the office, Marta closed the door and sat behind her desk. I know what you've been doing, she began, and Noemia felt her cheeks burn. You've been feeding a girl and her mother. Mrs. Marta, I can explain. If you want, I'll deduct it from my salary, but please. Marta raised her hand to stop her. I'm not reprimanding you, Noemia. No? The food doesn't represent much to the restaurant, but it means everything to that family. I want to know why you didn't tell me anything. Noemia lowered her gaze, embarrassed. I guess I would say no. Marta sighed. My restaurant never wastes food. I'd rather give it away than throw it away. From now on, we'll make suitable packages for them, with nutritious and varied food, and it won't be deducted from your salary. Noemia looked up, surprised. Thank you, Mrs. Marta. Now tell me more about this family. The routine continued with Marta's blessing. Now, Noemia brought food, donated clothes, books for Isabel, and occasionally medication for Fernanda. But Fernanda's situation was worsening. She was getting weaker and weaker, and more expensive medicines seemed to be the only ones that relieved her symptoms. On a rainy afternoon when Noemia arrived at the small apartment, she found Fernanda in bed with a high fever, and Isabel beside her, frightened but quiet. We need to take her to the hospital, said Noemia, alarmed. I can't. The hospital. The costs, Fernanda murmured weakly. I'll take care of it, Noemia insisted, not knowing how she would pay for the medical costs. She called a taxi, and with the help of the driver, they took Fernanda to the nearest hospital. Isabel clung to Noemia's hand, eyes full of fear but without shedding a tear. In the emergency room, the doctors quickly took Fernanda away, while Noemia filled out forms. Isabel remained by her side, swaying her body, manifesting her anxiety. After hours of waiting, a doctor approached. Relatives of Fernanda Lopez? We're friends. She only has her daughter, Noemia replied, hugging Isabel. The situation is critical. She needs immediate treatment, but it's expensive and requires insurance authorization. How much does it cost? Noemia asked, knowing that Fernanda didn't have adequate insurance. The doctor mentioned an amount that made Noemia pale. It was more than she earned in 6 months. I'll do what's necessary, she said determinedly, without knowing how she would get that amount. As the doctor walked away, Noemia hugged Isabel, who remained unusually quiet. Everything will be all right, little one, she assured, feeling a lump in her throat. That night, Isabel slept in Noemia's small apartment. The girl hardly spoke, but followed all instructions precisely, as if she understood the gravity of the situation. The next morning, Noemia called Marta to explain the situation and ask for a few days off. To her surprise, Marta not only agreed but promised to help financially. Together, they returned to the hospital to visit Fernanda. They found her connected to several monitors, paler than ever, but conscious. Isabel, Fernanda whispered when she saw her daughter enter. The girl ran to the bed and carefully took her mother's hand, as if afraid of breaking it. My brave one, Fernanda murmured, stroking Isabel's cheek. Then she looked at Noemia. Thank you for taking care of her. Don't thank me. We'll find a way to get money for your treatment, Noemia affirmed, with more confidence than she felt. Fernanda smiled weakly. What worries me most is Isabel. She needs stability, routine. I'll take care of her while you recover, Noemia promised. And you will recover, Fernanda. Leaving the room, Noemia found the doctor in the hallway. The man looked at her with a serious expression. If she doesn't receive treatment soon, the situation will worsen rapidly, he warned. It took too long to receive adequate attention. I understand, Noemia replied. I'm doing everything I can. In the following days, Noemia divided her time between the hospital, caring for Isabel, and her work at the restaurant, where Marta insisted on organizing a fundraiser among the frequent customers. The response was generous but still insufficient to cover the expensive treatment Fernanda needed. One afternoon, while Isabel was drawing at a table in the empty restaurant, Noemia counted the collected money in despair. They were far from the goal. The doorbell rang. Noemia looked up, ready to say they were closing, but the words died in her mouth. A tall man, dressed in an impeccable dark suit and sunglasses, entered, followed by two people who looked like security guards. The atmosphere of the modest restaurant changed with his imposing presence. All the employees stopped watching him. Good afternoon, he greeted with a deep and polite voice. I'm looking for Noemia. Noemia felt her legs tremble as she stepped forward. It's me, sir. The man took off his sunglasses, revealing piercing eyes that analyzed her for a moment before turning to Isabel, who continued drawing, seemingly oblivious to the commotion. And I imagine this is Isabel, he said, and it wasn't a question. At that moment, 4 vehicles with sirens stopped in front of the restaurant. Through the windows, Noemia saw that they were police cars. Her heart pounded. Who was this man, and why was the police accompanying him? The stranger approached Isabel with determined steps, while everyone held their breath. The tension was palpable as the elegant man approached Isabel. Noemia instinctively took a step towards the girl, protectively. Excuse me, sir, but who are you, and what do you want with Isabel? She asked firmly, despite her fear. The man looked at her, assessing her, and his lips curved into a slight smile. My name is Tomas Herrera, he replied calmly. And I came to help. Marta approached, drying her hands on her apron. Help? And why is the police outside? It's my escort, Tomas explained. For security reasons. But they're not here to cause trouble. He turned to Isabel, who was now looking at him with curiosity, without direct eye contact. Tomas bent down to be at her height, keeping a respectful distance. Hello, Isabel. I really like your drawing. The girl didn't respond verbally, but slightly pushed the paper towards him, a gesture that Noemia recognized as an unusual opening on Isabel's part. It's a very beautiful house, Tomas commented, observing the drawing. Is that where you'd like to live? Isabel softly agreed, with Mommy and with Noemia. Tomas stood up, looking at Noemia, who watched the exchange with a mixture of confusion and caution. I know everything about Fernanda and her situation, he said. And about what you've been doing for them, Noemia. How? She asked, increasingly confused. Tomas gestured to one of the people accompanying him, who stepped forward with a briefcase that he handed to his boss. The man placed it on the table and opened it, revealing documents and what appeared to be a check. I've been following this case for days, Tomas explained. A doctor friend contacted me when Fernanda was hospitalized. He told me about her situation and about the young waitress desperate to raise funds for the treatment. And why would that interest someone like you? Marta asked, expressing everyone's doubt. Tomas's eyes softened, showing unexpected vulnerability. Because I also had a daughter with autism, he revealed, and I know exactly what Fernanda is going through. The desperation, the constant struggle against a system that isn't prepared for our children. A silence fell over the room as everyone processed his words. Had? Noemia asked, noticing the past tense. She passed away a few years ago, a cardiac complication unrelated to her condition. Tomas's voice remained firm, but the pain was evident in his eyes. Since then, I've dedicated part of my fortune to helping families in similar situations. He turned to the briefcase and took out a check that he extended to Noemia. This will cover Fernanda's complete treatment, subsequent rehabilitation, and a year of specialized therapy for Isabel. Noemia looked at the check and felt her legs give way. The amount was 10 times more than they had managed to raise. I can't accept this, she murmured. It's not charity, Tomas clarified. It's an investment in Isabel's future and her mother's recovery. The only thing I ask in return is that when Fernanda is better, you consider working with me. She was a teacher, right? I run a center for children with special needs, and someone with your personal experience would be invaluable." Noemia looked at Isabel, who continued drawing calmly, oblivious to the conversation that would change her life. "Why don't we talk about this with Fernanda?" Tomas suggested. "The police cars are here to escort us to the hospital. The police collaborate with my foundation for special cases like this." The hospital room where Fernanda rested was illuminated by Isabel's presence, who ran to her mother with contained energy, careful not to touch any tubes or monitors. "Mommy, the tall gentleman says you'll be okay," the girl announced with absolute conviction. Fernanda, weak but conscious, turned her confused gaze to Noemia and the imposing stranger who entered behind her. "Fernanda, this is Mr. Tomas Herrera," Noemia introduced, still processing the events. "He came to help." Tomas approached the bed with a respectful bow. "Mrs. Lopez, it's an honor to meet you," he greeted. "Your daughter is extraordinary, and what Noemia has done for you is admirable." Fernanda tried to get up, but weakness prevented her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why do you want to help us?" Patiently, Tomas explained his personal story, his connection with autism, and his desire to help. He spoke of his educational center, the therapies they offered, and how he had heard about her case. "I want you to accept this help," he concluded, showing her the check. "Not as charity, but as an act of solidarity between parents who understand this struggle." Fernanda looked at the paper incredulously, then at her daughter, who was playing with a puzzle that Tomas had brought, and finally at Noemia, seeking confirmation that all of this was real. I don't know what to say," she murmured with tears in her eyes. "Don't say anything," Tomas replied. "Focus on recovering. I've already spoken to the doctors, and they're preparing everything to start treatment immediately." As Tomas left to speak with the doctor, Fernanda took Noemia's hand. "Is it real?" she asked in a whisper. "Is this really happening?" Noemia nodded, squeezing her hand. "It's real, Fernanda. It seems things are finally getting better." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Fernanda's treatment began immediately, and the results began to be noticed quickly. Isabel was enrolled in Tomas's educational center, where she received therapies adapted to her needs, while her mother recovered. Noemi continued working at the diner, but now split her time between the establishment, the hospital, and the center, where Tomas had given her a position as an assistant, recognizing her natural ability to communicate with Isabel. One afternoon, while observing Isabel in a therapy session, Noemi felt Tomas beside her. "Her progress is impressive," he commented. "She has a brilliant mind." "I always knew," Noemi replied proudly. "She just needed the opportunity to demonstrate it." Tomas watched her with an indecipherable expression. "Noemi, I need to confess something." She tensed, waiting for what he would say. "I've been watching you for longer than I care to admit," he began. "It wasn't a coincidence that I showed up at the diner that day. I was following you." "Why?" asked Noemi, surprised. "To ascertain your sincerity," he replied. "I've seen many people feigning kindness out of self-interest. I needed to know that your concern for Isabel and Fernanda was genuine." Noemi didn't know whether she should feel flattered or offended. "And did I pass the test?" "With flying colors," Tomas smiled. "What you did, secretly feeding that girl, risking your job, using your own money for medication. Few people would do that." There was silence between them as they watched Isabel interacting with her therapist. "There's something else," Tomas added. "I bought a building near the center. It has apartments that I'm adapting for families like Fernanda's, so they can live nearby and receive continuous treatment. I want to offer one to them." Noemi looked at him in admiration. "That's incredible. And I want you to supervise the program," he continued. "You've demonstrated exactly the kind of heart and commitment we need." "But I don't have a background in special education or social work," Noemi protested. "That can be learned," Tomas replied. "True empathy and dedication, that can't be taught." Fernanda's recovery progressed steadily in the following weeks. Each day she regained strength and color. Isabel, meanwhile, flourished in the structured environment of the center, where her special abilities were valued and not seen as obstacles. Noemi accepted Tomas's proposal and now divided her time between the diner, where Marta insisted she continue working at least half-time, and the educational center, where she was quickly learning about therapies and pedagogical methods for children with special needs. One afternoon, while Noemi was organizing the new apartment that Fernanda and Isabel would soon occupy, Tomás appeared at the door. "May I come in?" he asked with a formality that contrasted with his usual confidence. "Of course," Noemi replied, setting aside the curtains she was hanging. "Did something happen?" Tomás entered, observing the space that Noemi had transformed with details specifically designed for Isabel's needs. Color-coded zones, calm sensory spaces, and a meticulously organized study area. "You've done an incredible job here," he commented. "It's clear that you truly understand Isabel." "I just try to think about what would make her feel safe and understood," Noemi replied modestly. Tomás sat in one of the chairs and his expression became serious. "Noemi, there's something I haven't told you about myself. Something I think you need to know." She sat in front of him, intrigued by his tone. Before all this," he began, gesturing to the building and all it represented, "I lived on the street." Noemi looked at him in surprise. Nothing about that elegant and powerful man suggested a past of poverty. "My daughter and I went hungry," he continued. "Her mother abandoned us when she learned of her autism diagnosis. We were left with nothing." "I'm so sorry," Noemi murmured. "One day I was so desperate that I went into a diner, just like Isabel did with you. A waitress saw us, understood our situation, and secretly fed us. She gave us food for weeks." Noemi's eyes widened in understanding. "That woman changed my life," Tomás affirmed. "She helped me get a job, took care of my daughter while I worked, supported me when no one else did. Thanks to her, I could study at night, get my degree, and finally start my own business." "What happened to her?" Noemi asked, moved by the story. "She passed away before I could properly thank her," Tomás replied with regret. "I've always felt that debt. And that's why you help families like Fernanda's. For that reason, and because I know exactly what they're going through," he confirmed. "When my doctor friend told me about you, about how you secretly fed a girl and her sick mother, it was as if history was repeating itself. I couldn't help but get involved." Noemi was silent, processing the revelation. "I've been observing you these weeks, Noemi," Tomás continued. "Your dedication, your ability to learn, your natural connection with children. I'm not exaggerating when I say you're exactly what this center needs." "I don't know what to say," she replied, overwhelmed by the praise. "Don't say anything now," he suggested. "Just think about it. I want to offer you a permanent position as the center's deputy director, with the possibility that in the future you will take over completely." Before Noemi could respond, they heard voices in the hallway. Fernanda and Isabel had arrived to see their new home. Isabel ran in, stopping when she saw Tomás. Surprisingly, she approached him and showed him a drawing. "I made a portrait of you," she announced in her usual monotonous tone. Tomás took the paper reverently. It was a surprisingly detailed drawing, capturing his serious but kind expression, including details like the small scar on his left eyebrow that few noticed. "It's perfect, Isabel," he said with sincere admiration. "You have great talent." Fernanda entered afterward, walking firmly, almost unrecognizable compared to the frail woman Noemi had taken to the hospital weeks ago. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes shone with renewed life. "This is incredible," she exclaimed, looking at the apartment. "We're really going to live here." "It's all yours," Tomás confirmed. "And when you're ready, there's a job waiting for you at the center. No pressure, of course. Your health is the most important thing." Fernanda turned to Noemi with tears in her eyes. It all started because you fed my daughter that day," she said in a trembling voice. "I can never thank you enough." "You don't need to," Noemi replied, hugging her. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," interrupted Tomás. "Not anyone would have. Believe me, I know very well." While Isabel enthusiastically explored every corner of her new home, the three adults watched her with a mixture of pride and hope. It had been a difficult path, but now the future seemed bright, full of possibilities that had previously seemed unattainable. Noemi found herself reflecting on how a simple act of kindness, giving food to a hungry girl, had triggered this series of events that changed so many lives, including hers. "Sometimes the smallest things are the ones that have the biggest impact," Tomás commented as if reading her thoughts. Isabel, who had been exploring her new room, returned and took Noemi's hand. "Will you live with us?" the girl asked, with that direct frankness so characteristic of autism. The question took Noemi by surprise. She looked at Fernanda, who smiled approvingly, and then at Thomas, whose expression was indecipherable but expectant. "Not exactly, Isabel," she replied gently, "but I'll be very close, I promise." The girl seemed satisfied with the answer and returned to her exploration. Thomas took the opportunity to approach Noemi. "There's an empty apartment upstairs," he casually commented. "In case you're interested in being really close." Noemi looked at him, surprised by the offer and the warmth in the eyes of the man who, until recently, seemed so intimidating. At that moment, as the afternoon sun streamed through the freshly cleaned windows and the sound of Isabel's laughter filled the space, Noemi felt that everything was exactly as it should be. A cycle of kindness that had begun long ago with an anonymous waitress and a hungry child now continued through her. "I think I'd like that," she finally replied, feeling that a new chapter was beginning for all of them. Spring had arrived in the city, bringing with it an air of renewal that seemed to perfectly reflect the transformation in the lives of Noemi, Fernanda, and Isabel. The trees in the courtyard of the educational center had become covered with flowers, creating a tapestry of colors that enchanted the children, especially Isabel, who now spent hours drawing the shadow patterns that the branches created on the ground. 6 months had passed since that decisive day when Thomas had appeared at Marta's diner. 6 months of changes, adaptations, and new beginnings. Noemi had settled into the upstairs apartment, as Thomas had suggested. Her life had completely transformed. She continued working half-time at Marta's kitchen, but she dedicated most of her time to the educational center, where she had discovered a vocation she never knew she had. That morning, while watching the children in the courtyard during recess, Noemi felt a presence beside her. It was Fernanda, who now worked as a teacher at the center, fully recovered thanks to the treatment Thomas had financed. "What are you thinking about?" Fernanda asked, following Noemi's gaze to Isabel, who was sitting under a tree with her sketchbook, accompanied by another child who watched fascinated by the little artist's work. "About how much everything has changed," Noemi replied. "Sometimes I find it hard to believe that just over half a year ago, we were struggling to get a meal a day." Fernanda agreed, taking Noemi's hand in a gesture that had become habitual between them, a demonstration of the deep friendship they had developed. "I can never thank you enough," Fernanda said. "Not only for feeding us, but for everything, for not giving up when things seemed impossible." "You don't need to thank me," Noemi insisted. "Besides, without Thomas, we wouldn't have gotten very far." The mention of Thomas brought a knowing smile to Fernanda's face. "Speaking of Mr. Herrera," she began playfully, "I've noticed how he looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching." Noemi felt her cheeks blush, something that happened to her more and more frequently when Thomas was mentioned. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied, feigning concentration on the children in the courtyard. The relationship between Noemi and Thomas had developed slowly during these months. What began as mutual admiration for each other's commitment to Isabel's well-being had evolved into a deep friendship, with moments of tension suggesting the possibility of something more. Thomas, despite his position and wealth, was a reserved man, marked by the difficult experiences of his past. Noemi had discovered that behind that facade of a successful businessman was a person who understood suffering and valued authenticity above appearances. "You should talk to him," Fernanda suggested. "About what?" "About what you feel," Fernanda replied frankly. "Life is too short to let opportunities pass, don't you think? I learned the hard way." Before Noemi could respond, a burst of laughter caught her attention. Isabel was showing her finished drawing to several children who had approached, an unusual event, considering her previous tendency to isolate herself. The drawing was a collective portrait of all of them, with a level of detail surprising for her age. "She's progressed so much," Fernanda commented with maternal pride in her voice. "The therapists say they've never seen such rapid progress." "She always had that potential," Noemi replied. "She just needed the right environment to flourish." That same afternoon, Noemi was at Marta's diner, helping with the dinner shift. Although she now had responsibilities at the educational center, she had insisted on keeping a few hours at the diner. It was her way of honoring the place where it all had begun, and besides, she enjoyed the familiar atmosphere and the different work pace. Marta, who had become a kind of maternal figure for Noemi, watched her with a mixture of pride and nostalgia as she served the customers with the same cordiality as always. "I'm going to miss you when you finally leave for good," Marta commented during a quiet moment. "Although I understand that your place is now the center. I'll never leave this place completely," Noemi assured her. Besides, let's not forget that this is where it all started. If you hadn't let me give Isabel food— You did the right thing, Marta interrupted. And I just let you be who you really are, someone who can't turn their back on those who need help. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of a new customer. Both turned to see Tomas enter, dressed more casually than usual, without a tie, and with a relaxed air that contrasted with his usual formality. "Good evening, ladies," he greeted with a smile. "Mr. Herrera," Marta replied with a respectful bow. "To what do we owe the honor?" "I came to kidnap Noemi for a while, if you can spare her," Tomas explained. Marta looked at Noemi with a knowing smile. "Of course, she's almost finished her shift anyway." "What is it?" Noemi asked, intrigued by the unexpected visit. "I have something to show you," Tomas replied. "It's a surprise." After changing her uniform, Noemi left with Tomas, who guided her to his car. To her surprise, it wasn't the elegant chauffeured vehicle he usually used, but a more modest model that he drove himself. "Where are your security guards?" she asked, as she fastened her seatbelt. "I gave them the day off," he replied, with an enigmatic smile. "What we'll do today is personal." They drove in silence for a while, leaving the city towards a quiet residential area Noemi didn't recognize. Finally, Tomas stopped the car in front of a small cemetery surrounded by cypress trees. "Do you trust me?" he asked with a sudden seriousness. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. Tomas guided her along the cemetery paths until they stopped in front of a simple but well-maintained tombstone. It read, "Elena Fuentes, your kindness changed lives." "Elena was the waitress who fed my daughter and me when we had nothing," Tomas explained, his voice soft but laden with emotion. "I come here every month to thank her, to tell her how everything is going." Noemi looked at the tomb, moved by the gesture and the vulnerability Tomas was showing by sharing something so personal. "I could never thank her properly," he continued. "When I had the means to repay everything she did for us, it was too late. An accident took her." "I'm so sorry," Noemi murmured. "That's why when I heard about you, about what you were doing for Isabel and Fernanda, I felt that history was repeating itself. But this time I could intervene in time. I could ensure that your kindness was recognized and didn't go unrewarded." Tomas knelt before the tomb and placed a small bouquet of flowers he had brought. "Elena, this is Noemi," he said, as if the deceased could hear him. "She's exactly like you. She has the same heart, the same ability to see invisible people." Noemi, deeply moved, knelt beside Tomas. "Thank you, Elena," she said, following Tomas's example, "for what you did for them, and because, somehow, your act of kindness ended up connecting us all." They remained like that for a moment, in a respectful and moving silence. Finally, Tomas stood up and helped Noemi do the same. "There's something else I want to show you," he said, guiding her back to the car. The next stop was on a large plot of land on the outskirts of the city. There were construction machines, workers working, and the foundations of what appeared to be a large building. "What is this?" Noemi asked, observing the activity. "The future," Tomas replied enthusiastically. "It will be the new comprehensive center for autistic children and their families. Much larger than the current one, with the capacity to serve hundreds of children, with housing for vulnerable families, research labs, and a training program for educators." Noemi contemplated the magnitude of the project, amazed. "It's impressive," she commented. "When did this start?" 3 months ago, Tomas replied. "I wanted to wait until it was more advanced to show you, but today I felt it was the time." They walked around the grounds while Tomas explained the details. There would be areas specifically designed for different types of therapies, sensory spaces, art and music workshops, and even a garden where children could learn about nature. "And why are you showing me this now?" Noemi asked, sensing that there was something more. Tomas stopped, facing her directly. "Because I want you to be a part of this, Noemi, not just as an employee or collaborator, but as a partner. I want you to run this place with me." Noemi gasped, surprised by the proposal. "Tomas, I don't have the training or experience for something like this," she protested. "You have something more valuable," he retorted. "You have the right heart and intuition. You've demonstrated that with Isabel. Technical skills can be learned, but genuine empathy and commitment, that's innate." Tomas took Noemi's hands in his, a gesture that sent small electric shocks through her arms. "There's something else I want to tell you," he continued, his voice softer now. "These months working together, seeing you with the children, observing your dedication, have made me feel something I thought impossible after losing my family. Noemi felt her heart accelerate. "Noemi, I've fallen in love with you," Tomas confessed, with a vulnerability that contrasted with his usual assurance. "I don't expect you to feel the same, and I'll understand if you prefer to keep our relationship strictly professional, but I needed to say it." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Noemi processed Tomas's words, surprised not by the confession itself, for she herself had been struggling with similar feelings, but by the moment and the place chosen. "Why now? Why here?" she finally asked. Tomas smiled, relieved that this was her question and not a direct refusal. "Because this project represents the future," he explained, "and I wanted to know if that future could include us together, not just as colleagues, but as something more." Noemi looked around at the foundations of the building that promised so much for children like Isabel, and then again at Tomas, the man who had changed so many lives, including hers. "I've also developed feelings for you," she finally admitted, "but I was afraid. The difference between us—" "It doesn't matter how different we are," Tomas interrupted. "We've both known need and generosity. That defines us, not money or position." Noemi nodded, understanding his words. Slowly she approached and, in a spontaneous gesture that surprised them both, she stood on tiptoe to kiss him tenderly. "I think we can try," she said when they separated, "the project and us." Tomas's smile illuminated his face like Noemi had never seen before. The return to the center radiated new energy, joint plans, and possibilities. Upon arriving, they found Isabel waiting for them, her notebook clutched to her chest. "Noemi, tío Tomás," the girl exclaimed, using the affectionate nickname. "Mira mi dibujo." Isabel showed her artwork. The center, much larger and more colorful, surrounded by trees and happy children playing. "It's our center, but prettier," Isabel explained. Tomas and Noemi exchanged astonished glances. "Isabel, how did you know about the new center?" Tomas asked, perplexed. "I dreamt it," the girl replied naturally. "And now you will build it." Fernanda appeared, smiling at the expression on Tomas and Noemi's faces. "She's been drawing all afternoon," she commented. "She said it was a special place where many children would be happy." Isabel's intuition, that special quality of some children with autism, left them speechless. She seemed to perceive the project before it was even told to her. "Isabel, your drawing is perfect," Tomas said, kneeling down. "Would you like us to use it to decorate the new center?" The girl nodded enthusiastically, something unusual for her. "And can I have a room for drawing?" she asked. "Of course," Tomas replied. "In fact, I was thinking of an art workshop for you and other children." Isabel's face lit up. In an unexpected gesture, she briefly hugged Tomas before running inside. Fernanda watched them curiously. "What happened between you two? Something's different." Noemi and Tomas looked at each other, not knowing how to explain what had happened. Tomas spoke. "Let's just say we decided to build together, in more ways than one," he said, smiling. Fernanda understood and hugged Noemi. "It was about time," she whispered. It was coming. A year later, the new center was ready for its inauguration. The Isabel Center, as it was named in honor of the girl who brought them together, was an imposing yet warm structure, designed for children with autism and their families. The inauguration was intimate. Staff, families, and special guests like Marta, who closed her restaurant for the first time in years to attend. Isabel, more communicative and confident thanks to therapies and support, cut the ribbon alongside Tomas. The powerful man and the little girl, united by extraordinary circumstances, symbolized the spirit of the place, the connection between those who help and those who need help. After the ceremony, while the guests toured the facilities, Noemi talked with Fernanda in the sensory garden, a space with aromatic plants, fountains, and diverse textures. "Who would imagine that it all started with a clandestine soup?" Fernanda reflected, watching Isabel interact with other children. "Life connects us in strange ways," Noemi replied. "Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences." Tomas joined them, putting an arm around Noemi with the naturalness of a consolidated relationship. "Everything is ready," he announced. "The first families will arrive next week, and the therapy program begins on Monday." "It's incredible," Fernanda commented. "So many lives that will change thanks to this place." Tomas looked at Noemi tenderly, all thanks to a waitress who didn't ignore a hungry girl. Isabel approached, followed by children who had adopted her as a leader, something unthinkable a year ago. "Noemi, Mom, Uncle Tomas," she exclaimed. "Come see the art room. I have so many ideas." The adults looked at each other with knowing smiles and followed the girl who guided them with renewed confidence. As they walked, Noemi reflected on her extraordinary journey, from despair to hope, from loneliness to connection, from scarcity to abundance, all because of a simple act of kindness that unleashed a chain of generosity and love. The new center was not just a building. It was a symbol of what can be achieved when people truly see each other, when they recognize their shared humanity beyond circumstances. That night, after everyone had left, Noemi and Tomas returned to the center to check that everything was ready. In the quiet of the empty building, they contemplated what they had built. "You know," Tomas began, his voice soft in the silence, "I've thought a lot about Elena lately, about how one act of kindness continues to bear fruit long afterward." Noemi nodded, intertwining her hands with his. "I think she would be proud," she replied, "not only of you, but of what her gesture inspired. Sometimes I think that in some way she guided us to find each other," Tomas reflected, "so that we could continue what she started." They stopped in front of a newly painted mural at the main entrance. It was an enlarged version of Isabel's drawing, showing a colorful place full of happy children under a bright sun. Below, a discreet plaque read, "In honor of Elena Fuentes, whose kindness continues to change lives." "I like to think that's how it is," Noemi said, resting her head on Tomas's shoulder. "That acts of kindness don't end. They just transform and continue." Tomas kissed her forehead tenderly, grateful for the journey they had traveled. "Ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "Ready," Noemi replied with a confident smile, "for tomorrow and for everything that comes." As they left the building, hand in hand and with hearts full of promises, they both knew they had found their purpose: to continue the chain of kindness that had begun in a modest restaurant with a simple meal secretly offered to a hungry girl. And somewhere Isabel slept peacefully, dreaming of bright colors and endless possibilities, sure that she was seen, valued and loved, not in spite of her differences, but precisely because of them.